Hello, I'm Rami Mansour, and this semester I focus on solving a research gap of unarmed officers and public perception. Within the United States, the most common interaction between the average citizen and the government is the police. However, this interaction is not viewed as positive, as waves of publicized police brutality has left officer perception in a negative light. Yet, unarmed officers could be the solution to this. Current literature illuminates that firearms promote aggression and perceptions of aggression. It is possible that this extends into the field of policing, and unarmed officers might be viewed in a different light. The proposal seeks to investigate this by proposing a research project that illuminates discrepancies between perception and compliance between armed and unarmed officers. My research question is as follows. What is the discrepancy in perception between and compliance between armed and unarmed officers? My hypothesis is that unarmed officers will probably obtain more compliance and better perception. So this specific topic serves as the research gap within the field of policing. Armed officers are not deeply investigated within current literature. Current literature instead focuses on firearms. And from this, we can draw behavioral comparisons that we can draw into the field of policing. We cannot directly draw causation, but we can imply correlation through current research. This has left two key concepts, the weapons effect and aggressive stimuli. These segue into the overall negative officer perception, which is displayed by this pyramid right here. The weapons effect is the idea that firearms promote aggressive and hostile behaviors within an individual. Researchers have shown that individuals who carry firearms are likely to engage in aggressive behaviors while driving. This displays that individuals with firearms are possibly more likely to engage in brutal and aggressive tactics in policing. A Pew research conducted on law enforcement officers pretty much expanded this by displaying that officers who fired their weapons at least once in the field of duty are 7% more likely to engage in tough physical methods that lead to aggressive perceptions. This is also collaborated on by the idea of aggressive stimuli. Aggressive stimuli is the concept that items may cause hostility. This was first linked to firearms in 1967 in an experiment by Berkowitz and LePage. They displayed that firearms, when associated with an individual, cause aggression, thoughts towards them. Even the firearm present itself caused associations of hostility. This indicates that people view firearms in a hostile, aggressive light, which can extend to policing. This is expanded upon by a survey conducted on individuals in Great Britain, where individuals were shown armed and unarmed officers and asked to gauge these officers based on legitimacy, trustworthiness, friendliness, approachability, and respectfulness. Officers who were armed were generally rated lower than unarmed officers. This indicates that individuals within the survey actually preferred unarmed officers and viewed them as less aggressive. This could extend into the actual field of policing and compliance. These concepts illustrate that unarmed officers are likely to act and be perceived as less hostile. This overall paints a picture that these two concepts interlock into displaying into policing, but we do not have direct causation of this. This has led to a research gap that requires experimentation. This has troubled me all semester because I have not been able to draw direct conclusions because on perceptual issues and compliance issues due to the research. These researchers do not directly state or have data on unarmed officers, and instead I'm only able to draw correlation. I defined matching sources between firearm sources and policing sources, which is why I had to limit my overall terms to just two. This semester, I focused on filling the gap between this by proposing an experiment. The experiment I set to propose was the best choice because it allowed me to directly target the research gap through creating my own data where it's not available. Armed officers are not necessarily prevalent throughout the world, and where they are prevalent, there aren't that many data sources directly comparing perception and compliance between armed and unarmed officers in that area. I specifically looked at Europe and Africa, and there was not much sources specifically there. So now I'll be talking about the experiment. A simplified explanation of the experiment is as follows. The experiment itself will involve causing a fake officer and participant interaction in which the participant will have an incentive not to disclose what's inside the box, which is located here. The officer will either be armed or unarmed, depending on the group, and the officer will be placed mild, verbal, inquisitive pressure in order to get the suspect, or not suspect, the participant to disclosing the contents of the box. Participants will be outfitted with a heart rate monitor, a recording of the event through the officer's perspective through a body cam, and a determination of the level of cooperation by the officer. All these will serve as a dependent variable to determine the subject's stress levels and level of compliance. In order to ensure that stuff remains consistent, there will only be one officer. The independent variable will be the firearm. The overall hypothesis is that the unarmed officer will increase cooperation levels and decrease stress. The actual experiment itself is more in depth. There, of course, is ethical constraints when it comes to misleading the subject